Good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning to those of you joining us today. At least it's morning in Illinois. It may not be morning where you're joining us from. We're so happy to have you joining us today as I talk to Dean Mouza about her first year as Dean of the College of Education. My name is Emily Stone, and I'll start off just by introducing myself and introducing Dean Mouza, and then we'll go through some questions that you've submitted and some questions that we thought were important to highlight this morning. So as I said, my name is Emily Stone, and I'm the Director of Public Engagement in the College of Education. I started this position in 2021. It's a newly created position, and I'm so excited to be doing this work. My work supports faculty and staff and students in increasing the impact and the relevance of their work through partnerships with the local community and across the state of Illinois. Before I came to the University of Illinois, I was at the University of Zurich in Switzerland, doing actually some very similar work, making connections between policy and research and practice. And before that, I completed my Master of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University. My passion is really for projects that bring together public health and education and equity together. And we saw during the pandemic just how interwoven those topics are. As we saw teachers and administrators become public health officials overnight, whether or not that was something that they wanted to be doing as a part of their jobs. And we see that continuing to be a theme as mental health is a really big issue in our school communities and our own campus. So I'll stop there, and now I'd love to introduce Dean Mouza. Chrystalla Mouza was the Director and Distinguished Professor of Teacher Education, specializing in educational technology at the University of Delaware School of Education, and a professor of computer and information sciences in Delaware's College of Engineering. She completed her doctorate and her graduate studies in instructional technology and media and education from Teachers College, Columbia University, and also completed postdoctoral work at the Educational Testing Service, or ETS as most of us knew it. She has expertise in teacher learning, applications of technology in K-12 classrooms, and computer science education. And we'll get to hear much more from her about all of that. But beyond Dean Mouza's international reputation as a scholar, she's a thoughtful and a skillful leader with a vision for the future of education in our college and across the state of Illinois and beyond. And I'm really excited to hear more about that vision today. So I'd love to transition now to speaking with you a little bit about the vision that I just mentioned. Good morning again. And I'd like to ask you first about your move to Illinois and what drew you to Illinois.
Well, good morning, first of all, Emily, and thank you for your kind introduction. It's really a pleasure to be able to spend this time with you this morning and with our alumni and friends who are here with us today. So what drew me to Illinois? So it's kind of funny that you ask, because it's exactly a year, I believe, since my interview last April. And I got this question quite a bit, as you might imagine, in the 2 days that I have been here for that interview. So lots of points, lots of reasons why I was really attracted to Illinois. I think the first one is obviously the University of Illinois as a whole is a world-class institution, but the College of Education specifically has a long history of innovation and excellence. I was familiar with the work of the college. I have listened to faculty here give talks at conferences. I have read their work, so I really had a lot of respect and admiration for the work of the college in the first place, and was really excited to be able to work with such an outstanding group of colleagues and be able to learn with them. I would say a second really key point was the strong alignment between the university's vision and commitment to issues of excellence, equity, and inclusion in my own vision for the college. So it's always good when there's alignment, there with the priorities of the institution. Third, I would say definitely the land-grant mission of the institution was a big draw for me. You mentioned how I spent my career at the University of Delaware, where also had a strong land-grant mission. So being able to and have the opportunity to work closely with the communities we serve, both locally and globally, was really, really important to me. I would say as a fourth point, really the strong interdisciplinary focus of the university and the college as a whole. Again, you noted how I had appointments both in education and computer science, so I have always considered myself as an interdisciplinary scholar. So being in an institution and a college that really has the mechanisms and the supports in place to make that happen was really important. And lastly, my husband is actually a graduate of the University of Illinois. So even though I've never visited until my interview last April, I felt like I already knew quite a bit about the institution from his own lived experiences and through sports. So we've been huge Illini fans for a long time. So we're actually very happy to be able to cheer the sports teams in person this year.
It's so nice to have that personal connection as
Yes.
well. And I think, when I read your bio, it's so apparent that you chose the field of education from a very early stage of your career. What is it that drew you to the field of education, and what keeps you inspired to work in education today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll take you a little back. So you probably know this, but I was born in Cyprus, which is a small island in the Mediterranean. And my parents grew up at a fairly difficult time. So they didn't have an opportunity to go to college. They actually didn't have an opportunity to go to high school. So, and soon in life, our family has also become refugees. So we had to move to a different part of the country and really just start from scratch. So growing up, I have two older sisters. They also did not have an opportunity to go to college. At the time, there wasn't actually a higher education institution in Cyprus, which made it really difficult. But I would say, I was somewhat fortunate because by the time I was growing up, certainly the conditions have improved dramatically. So I think while I was in college, I don't think there was ever, when I was in high school, I don't think there was ever a question that I would go to college. And as someone who has experienced firsthand, the importance of education and how the rest of my family was really denied that privilege, I would say I became very committed to contributing, back. It also helped, I would say, that back in the day and in Cyprus, teaching was still a very respected career, very respected job, especially, and it was not uncommon for excelling students, really pursue a career in teaching. And there was a teacher shortage, so I think all together, really just motivated me to follow teaching, as a career in college. I pursued my elementary education degree, and when I returned back to Cyprus, I was appointed to a school not very far from where I actually went to school as an elementary student. And my very first day, as I walked in the doors, I didn't know that, but my former fifth grade teacher was actually at the school. I actually had her for 2 years, fourth and fifth grade. And of course, she had a list of all the new faculty, so she knew and recognized my name. And she literally welcomed me with a notebook that I had in fifth grade that she had kept all these years. Wow. Because of my neat handwriting, I guess. It's not neat anymore. But I think that really just speaks so much to the relationships that teachers and students, build over time. And she really just served as my mentor that whole year. We had a very close relationship. So again, that bond that teachers and students create over time, that has really been inspiring. And my second year, I was appointed to a smaller school, like in a fairly underserved community. And there, I think it was really important to see the commitment of the parents and the students in education, even when resources, were not prevalent. And that's just about the time when I would say technology was also making its way into the classroom. So I just really became very committed to thinking about how can I become the best teacher, especially in schools where resources are lacking. And I was fortunate to receive a Fulbright scholarship that allowed me to come to the United States to pursue graduate studies. So I came in the United States in the mid-90s with literally one suitcase. And I think, again, that speaks to the transformational value of higher education, to really change the lives of people from all walks of life. So in many ways, I feel like I am a living proof, of the power of higher education. That really just fuels my commitment to making higher education more accessible to people, and especially the Illinois education, more accessible to all of those, who like to pursue it.
Wow, yeah. I've heard your story before, but it still is really inspiring to hear it again.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
I think that, a couple of the themes that you spoke to are so important for, in your leadership position now. It's really inspiring for students and others to look at you and see what is possible. And also, as you mentioned, the power of the mentorship of teachers is just huge. I think every single person has a story about a teacher who made a difference in their lives, and I think that's a piece of what is so amazing working in education is supporting those teachers and the students at the same time.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. So I want to transition a little bit to talking about your priorities as dean. And we received several questions from those of you joining us today. Thank you for submitting those, and we're going to try to weave those into what we're talking about today. But from the very early days here, you've spoken about 3 big priorities that you have, the 3 E's, excellence, equity, and engagement. And I thought, it would be great for us to talk about each of those priorities this morning, starting with excellence. And so I wanted to ask you first, just if you could describe what you mean by excellence as a priority, and give some examples of programs or projects that are happening in this space.
Yeah, so that's definitely a great question. I like how they aligned. It's easy for people to remember. So it's interesting how people come back to those 3 E's, and I'm glad it worked out this way. So obviously, excellence is a big word. It could definitely mean different things to different people. I guess the way I'm thinking about it, it's across 2 domains. So, for example, in teaching, when I think about how we want to be excellent in our instruction, the instruction we provide to our students, I'm thinking about the ways in which we integrate evidence-based practices in our approaches, including culturally responsive practices to make sure that we address the needs of our students, but also just in general how we draw on the extensive literature on how people learn. And our faculty, as you know, they're versed in those principles. So the way that they, again, incorporate those, into their instruction, to me, that, speaks to that excellence in teaching. And the second piece, when we talk about research and how do we define that, again, that's a very broad, type of space. So some might say excellence is based on the quality of the journals we publish in, or the number of times someone reads and cites our articles. And I think those are all important issues. I don't want to discount them, but the way I think about excellence is mostly focusing on how impactful and consequential the work that we do might be. And there's definitely plenty of examples around the college that I could reference, but one that comes in mind is, for example, the work that Dr. Samuel Kirk has done in special education, where he coined learning disabilities, and as a result, there were federal programs and policies that emerged out of this work. So that speaks to the impact, that our work could have, both in terms of scholarship, policy, and practice. So I really like to think more about what is the impact of the work that we're doing, and how we're able to improve the lives of the people we serve.
Thanks. Yeah, that really helps. And so let's talk about some of the initiatives happening in the college in the space of excellence. I know there's a lot.
Yes, absolutely. So I brought my notes because it's so much to cover, and I really wanted our alumni and friends, to have a pretty good picture, of all the initiatives that are happening in the college. And I know there isn't enough time to cover them all, but lots of exciting initiatives happening in the college, both in terms of our instructional aspect of the house, new and innovative programs, but also on the research side. So for example, we are constantly thinking about new innovative programs that might really address more societal needs and really be more responsive to the needs of the students that we serve. One such program is the Computer Science Plus Education program that we have that's launching this coming fall. We're very excited about that, and I think that covers a lot of what I have already kind of touched upon. So for example, the interdisciplinary nature of the work that we do. So that's a collaboration between the College of Education and the College of Engineering. The campus as a whole, but also campuses around the country, they're just seeing such demand for majors that involve some type of computing or some type of STEM. So I think really just allows us the opportunity to capitalize on the strengths of the campus and the strengths that we bring as a College of Education. So we're very excited about that. So again, we'll be launching in the fall, and that's 2 years in the College of Engineering, 2 years in our college. And the whole premise is to really support those students who aspire to become teachers of computer science. So that's an area of really high demand in high schools around the country right now, but unfortunately there are not enough teachers to cover that. So we're hoping to begin to address some of those shortages in that area. Similarly, there's great shortages in STEM teachers across middle and high schools. So for our audience, STEM refers to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So I have a new program in secondary mathematics education. So the students could just apply directly to secondary math in the College of Education. And again, we're really just looking to support, those teacher shortages, both in Illinois and elsewhere, by preparing high-quality STEM teachers. So transitioning from secondary to early childhood, we're also very excited about our early childhood program that it's designed to support sort of like career changers. So those students who already have an associate degree from a community college and they're looking to get certified as early childhood professionals. So that's another great area of need, both again in the state of Illinois and elsewhere. So that's a fully online program too, so that's very innovative and very different from what we're used to do here in the college. So I really kudos to our colleagues, who are willing to put in the work to really design a whole new program, to really support the needs of those professionals. And what it's really interesting to say is that that program is supported by state funding as a result of legislation that one of our alums, Senator Chrystalla was able to put forward. So again, very exciting to see some of the impactful work, that our alumni are engaged on a daily basis. Enrollments are looking really strong. We're very excited about that. Even during the times when we saw our peers around the country really experiencing declines in their teacher education programs, I would say we held pretty steady. So again, that's very important given how we're able to contribute back to the teacher workforce, in our state of Illinois. We're at the undergraduate level, we're also in the process of revising our learning and education studies major, and this is a program that's designed mostly for students who may not necessarily want to be classroom teachers, but they still have interest in working in education settings. So we're really trying to strengthen to provide more opportunities for them to pursue their own interests, have coursework that's really tailored to the needs of our undergraduate audience. And the graduates of that program, they're doing phenomenal. A number of them, they are already enrolled in top-ranked graduate programs around the country, including Harvard and Illinois. So we're very proud of those graduates. Lastly, I would say that in the online space, we've just made great strides. We continue to be recognized as leaders in online education. And really just that speaks again to the importance of making the Illinois education accessible, even to those audiences who can't be with us in person. So our faculty really work tirelessly to make sure that we deliver high quality and affordable online instruction.
Yeah, that's great to hear about all of those programmatic developments, and especially great to think about the two different audiences of students that we have now, with the possibility of teaching entire programs online. So,
yes.
It's great. Yeah, and you spoke about excellence also, not just in the programmatic context, but also in terms of research and some of the work that our faculty are doing in their scholarship. Do you want to share any examples in that space?
Yeah, well, we obviously have a lot of examples there. You know, I would say that we definitely continue to be a powerhouse when it comes to research, and our faculty are recognized widely, you know, for their contributions. Just in the last few months, we have faculty who have received awards from the Council of Exceptional Children, from the American Educational Research Association, from the National Association for Research in Science Teaching. So it's just wonderful to see our faculty receive the recognition that they deserve. And those are very difficult awards to receive. So I think, again, for our faculty to be right there, you know, being recognized for their outstanding work, it's a huge accomplishment. And not just nationally, but across campus, our faculty continue to be recognized with a number of both research and teaching awards, as well as our graduate students. So they just recently had a competition, for example, where they presented some of their ideas, and a number of our graduate students were recognized for the way that they were able to present their work in 5 minutes. So that's very powerful. Our faculty, really, again, the areas of research that they're engaged in, it spans, you know, across various disciplines. But I would just highlight, just as an example, you know, recently there's just been so much hype around ChatGPT, for example. And so many of our faculty have actually been involved, you know, in the role of artificial intelligence in education for so long. So for them, you know, they're just ready to engage with those conversations. They have been thinking about those issues for quite some time. So just as an example, one of our colleagues has been looking at how we can use data to analyze the strategies employed by the students who are working to debug computer programs. We have a faculty who's looking at how artificial intelligence can support those children with speech and language processing difficulties. So we were already, you know, on the cutting edge, you know, even before everyone's attention was on artificial intelligence. And lastly, I would say we're in the process of finalizing several faculty hires for next year. And I'm just so excited, you know, to be able to welcome a number of outstanding faculty next year who are doing cutting edge work in areas such as literacy, STEM education, equity, philosophy in education. So we're one of very few colleges around the country that still have philosophy and education programs. And our colleagues are taking that scholarship to the next level, you know, really just addressing contemporary issues like ethics and justice, you know, in policy and practice. So just outstanding work overall. So I'll just stop here, and I would definitely encourage our audience as well. There's a lot of that on our website. We try to keep it updated with a lot of the research stories, you know, of what our faculty are engaged in.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a lot, and I know there's so much more.
Yes, absolutely.
It's only the tip of the iceberg. But it really speaks to the interdisciplinarity of the work happening in the college, as you mentioned. So we've spoken about your excellence priority, and I wanted to move to your second priority around equity. And it's another one that can capture a lot of work happening in the college, but I'd love to hear some examples of initiatives that are focused on equity within the college.
Thank you. So the way I think about it is that excellence and equity, they go hand in hand. And so I refer to it as equity. In other places you might hear the term diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think that really just speaks to the commitment to respect diversity of people and ideas. And again, as I mentioned, I think the two go hand in hand. I don't think we can be excellent without diversity. So I always try to be mindful, of that every time we talk about excellence, diversity and equity also have to be at the foundation of how we think about the work we do. So yeah, and we have a number of equity initiatives around the college as well. Just again, very briefly, I'll address a couple of the programs that we have. So for example, we have a new Master's of Science in Mental Health Counseling. Our faculty are really redefining, what does it mean, to be a counselor. That's a very high demand program. It provides students with the Illinois Professional Counselor license. And for any of us who have been following the news, that's another area of great shortage. So we actually have seen an increased number of applications in that program beyond our capacity to support them. So we're really working very hard to see how we can expand our capacity, to make sure that, again, we respond to the needs of our student, of our audience, but also the communities that we serve. We also now have an embedded counselor in our undergraduate suite. It's not surprising to many, but the pandemic has really made it difficult for our students. So as we're transitioning back on campus, just making sure that we have the resources to support them. Because again, I've mentioned how we're committed to making education accessible to all, and I think as part of that is also making sure that we support our students when they get here, because it's very important that, again, we have the resources to make sure that all of our students, no matter what walks of life they're coming, they have the support they need, and one of those supports is really the mental health resources that they need. So again, very excited about that. We have a trauma-informed certificate in special education, again, to be more responsive to a lot of the K-12 needs that we see. So we're really hoping to equip this new generation of teachers with all the skills they need to be effective in the classroom. And again, just referring back to the interdisciplinary nature of the work, the Cancer Education and Management in Diverse Communities certificate. This is a very exciting initiative with the Cancer Institute that's really hoping to prepare those professionals who are engaged with cancer education and being able to evaluate and look at the impact of interventions, particularly in communities that are underserved and diverse, because it's very important to all communities, to be able to have access, to high quality interventions and for us to know how they're working. So I'll just stop here for now.
Yeah, and I mentioned before how much health and education intersect, and in your last examples of programs, we really saw that, from mental health to cancer education. We can't be thinking about education without also thinking about health in all things. So
exactly,
it's really great to hear about those. All right, well, we've spoken about two of your priorities now, excellence and equity, and now I'll shift to your third priority around engagement. Of course, I'm excited to talk about this priority. Can you tell me a little bit about the types of initiatives that we have going on in the education space, engagement space, sorry? Yeah,
so, well, this is the area of your expertise, Emily, so I was going to have you talk a little bit about that. But I would say that, as you noted, this is a key priority for the college to make sure that we're responsive to the needs of the communities that we serve. And I'm very excited about the work that we're doing together to create a more comprehensive community engagement strategy for our college. We are one of 6 units that, as you know, receive funding from the Vice Chancellor's office to create a college-wide comprehensive engagement strategy. And it's really been powerful to be able to work with you and some of our faculty and our community partners to begin to imagine what this might look like. So I know you're already working on a lot of other things, so it would be great if you can actually share with our audience some of those initiatives.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I can talk about public engagement all day, so I'll also have to narrow myself down to just share a few examples of great work that's happening in the college. When I joined in this position in 2021, there was already so much amazing work happening. And really, in my role, there's an opportunity to support that work and coordinate that work, as you mentioned, through this strategic planning process. And also to really be a resource for our local community and beyond, that they can come to me with needs that they have, and I can help to find the right person in the college who can partner with them to meet those needs. And whenever we can do that, I think that's just the most wonderful type of work to be working on. So I'll share a few more examples of the kinds of things happening in this space. We're just finishing our first year, as you know, of the Public Engagement Faculty Fellows. We had 4 Public Engagement Fellows this year, and we'll actually have 6 next year, so the program is growing. They are all faculty within the college who really are passionate about public engagement and are each working on their own publicly engaged research project. And in addition, they're supporting us as a college and thinking about some important questions like, what are our values within the public engagement space as a unit, and what do we even mean when we talk about public engagement? And so they're starting to lay out some frameworks like, you know, we want the work that we do to be reciprocal. We want it to benefit our community as much as it, you know, benefits us, and so forth. We want there to be trust building in the process. We want there to be transparency about everyone's goals and needs. Partnerships can be complex between, you know, research institutions and their surrounding communities and beyond. So just to give a couple of examples, one fellow, Cherie Avent, has been working on a project partnering with local African American churches, and they've been thinking about what are the needs during COVID-19 of these churches and how can we partner to meet those needs and create educational resources that they can share with their communities around COVID-19. And now they're working together on a podcast to really share about the experience of a certain church in our local community during the pandemic and how did that change everything that they did. Another faculty fellow, Erica Mason, is working in the space of very locally with a school locally, thinking about how do they improve math education for students with disabilities, and how can we, you know, really partner closely to see how this work, you know, looks in the classroom and outside. I'll shift gears a little bit from the fellows to talk about another relatively new initiative that the college has been working on. The Freedom Schools, which you know, were in Champaign for a long time, and then since 2003, I believe, we're not here anymore, and so faculty member John Hale has been partnering very closely with Champaign Unit 4 Schools and with Dream House, a local nonprofit, on bringing the Freedom School back to Champaign. They've completed 2 summers, and in the 3rd summer they're planning to grow from serving 50 students to 150 students. And you know, this is a really exciting program because it supports especially students of color with helping to improve reading skills in a way that's very culturally responsive, has a very progressive anti-racist curriculum, and incorporates so many amazing books by authors of color, and this is through the Children's Defense Fund, this work. So
wonderful.
Yeah, that's something newer happening in the college. And I'll share another newer initiative in the college. This one's been around since 2020, but growing all the time. I mentioned, you know, that in my role and as a college, you know, we're not just thinking about public engagement for faculty or staff. We're also really thinking about public engagement for students and how can they tie those experiences that they have in the community with their future as a teacher or educator, because they want to understand the whole picture of a student. What does their life look like outside the classroom as well as what it looks like inside the classroom? And so we launched a program called We See You, the long name, We See You Community Engaged Scholars, to really support students in doing more service and public engagement during their time at Illinois. And it's a partnership cross-campus, so it's not just happening in College of Ed. And you know, we have these recognition programs for students in academics like Phi Beta Kappa or Summa Cum Laude, but before we didn't have something that recognized students in service. And so this program really aims to uplift service and students who do a lot of public engagement, and simultaneously reach out to organizations across the local community, hear about those needs, and match them with classes wherever possible. So for example, if a local organization needs a program evaluation completed, we would love to match them with a class in the College of Education teaching program evaluation. The students can carry it out under the oversight of a faculty member, and it really helps both parties involved. And that's what we're talking about when we think about reciprocity and mutual benefit.
Yes. Yeah.
Students gain really valuable skills. So obviously very excited about that program too. And there's so many long-running centers in the college who have done such great work, and I'll just name one, but I could name a dozen. The Education Justice Project, I had the opportunity to interview the director of EJP in the fall as a part of our Engaged at Illinois series, and Rebecca Ginsburg invited 3 Education Justice Project alumni to join us. And Education Justice Project is all about creating a more equitable and just world through education, and particularly through providing post-secondary education within prisons. And so it's a very unique student population. They have very special needs. But the alumni in this event just spoke about what a difference it made for them to get that type of education while they were incarcerated, and then what it's been like for them as they left, and how focused they've been on social justice and equity outside. So that was a very meaningful conversation, and it's a really important center within the College of Education.
Yeah.
So I told you I could talk about public engagement all day, and I wasn't kidding. But so I will stop there. But please know that there's so much more happening within the college, and our colleagues are so committed to this area. It's really amazing.
This is wonderful. As someone who has taught a service learning course for many years, I think the We See You program is just so exciting. Really speaks to my heart, because I have seen firsthand, both the benefits from the student side and then the community side. Not to mention the K-12 students were always excited to have college students near them. In many ways, they're really serving as role models, for them, especially, our students who might not necessarily see themselves, in college down the road. So that's wonderful. And I'm glad you mentioned the Education Justice Project. I had an opportunity to visit with them in the fall, and I think the response from the students they serve just speaks volume to the importance of the work. And speaking about recognitions, they will be recognized later this month with an award. So,
thanks for mentioning that. Yeah. So we've spoken about all 3 of your priorities, which is wonderful to hear about: excellence, equity, and engagement. And I thought we could close by just asking you about, when you think about your legacy, what kind of legacy do you hope to leave at Illinois during your tenure here?
Oh, that is a very big question.
It is a big one.
Yeah. Well, I would say, the role of the dean is really a role of service. So my goal is really to work to provide the resources and supports that our faculty, staff, and students need to continue to maintain their excellence. We have the talent, so I think it's really just a matter of making sure that we're able to, again, provide the supports and resources they need to maintain that excellence, both at local and global scale. And as you heard me say, again, I think one of my key priorities is really just making sure that the University of Illinois College of Education programs are available and accessible beyond the local community. Really just try to scale our footprint, and we already have a very good track record of that. We get requests or we get updates from our students from around the world, about how their Illinois education really just transformed their lives. So just maintaining that and even expanding, and we have a number of programs already in place that really just expand our footprint to a global level. So again, my hope is that really just driven by our commitment to excellence, diversity and equity, that we really work to become partners, both locally and globally, in ensuring that our work has meaningful impact in those communities that we serve.
Thanks for that. It was a big question, but it's so great to hear about this vision that you have. So I think we're going to wrap up our conversation there. And if there were questions that came up for those of you watching us today that we didn't address throughout the conversation, please reach out. We always want to hear from you, and you can send questions to advancement@education.illinois.edu. And we really hope to hear from you. And thanks for joining us today, and thank you for sharing so much of your story and your vision with me and with all of our audience.